Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 4, Episode 4 of Hulu's Only Murders in the Building, entitled The Stuntman. Obviously, the title here refers directly to Sazz, as well as her peers, who we meet in this episode, but of course is also based on a film of the same name. Now, I'm going to read directly from Wikipedia for a little longer than I usually do, because there's a few things that I want to, well, there's not a few things, there's one major thing that I want to cite as it pertains to this film. So, The Stuntman is a 1980 American satirical, psychological, anti-war action comedy film starring Peter O'Toole. It tells the story of a young fugitive who hides as a stunt double on the set of a World War I movie, whose charismatic director will do seemingly anything for the sake of his art. The line between illusion and reality is blurred as scenes from the inner movie cut seamlessly to real life and vice versa. There are examples of movie magic where a scene of wartime carnage is revealed as just stuntmen and props, and where a shot of a crying woman becomes, with scenery, props, and soundtrack, a portrait of a grieving widow at a Nazi rally. The protagonist begins to doubt everything he sees and hears, and at the end is faced with real danger when a stunt seems to go wrong. Man, I mean, that sounds like a really good fucking movie. I'm kind of upset that I haven't seen it. I'm like, I need to check this shit out. And what I wanted to highlight about this movie is because it's in stark contrast with how I feel about this episode. Like, this might be my least favorite episode of the entire series. Like, the show feels like it's kind of lost its way a bit at this point. Like, this thing was all over the place. On one hand, I like the character work that the show is doing this season, like with Charles grappling with the nature of his relationship with Sazz and how it could have contributed to her death. I like digging into Oliver's insecurities this week, with him not feeling, good enough for Loretta, being scared to fail at marriage. All that stuff, I think, has been really good this season. But everything else just feels really disconnected, unfunny, and I think most importantly and most disappointingly, uninspired. Last week I expressed disappointment with the entire B-list group being heavily featured, but the episode still not being that funny. Felt like it was a waste to get all that talent in the same place and come up with scenes like that shitty improvisation scene, or to half-ass that Perfect Strangers moment. Like, man, you got all these great comedic actors here, legends, right? And this is what you wrote for them to do? It's like, it was just really disappointing. And it felt like more of the same this week. Paul Rudd returns to play Ben Glenroy's stunt double, and I had to sit through this scene of him auditioning to be Charles' stunt double by intentionally hurting himself. And I'm like, is this supposed to be funny? Like, because what are we doing here? Like, this was barely funny when Jim Carrey did it in Liar Liar in 1997. Now here we are doing this again nearly 30 years later. Like, you got Paul Rudd back, and this is what you give him? Like, this? Like, I don't know, man. And then the whole reveal, I don't even really want to call it that, of the rent control scheme with, like, the West Wing, Arconia residents and Dudenoff. Like, what a, massive and colossal letdown that was for an explanation for what their deal is. Like, I keep coming back to the word uninspired, but that's what you come up with as an explanation for what's going on with them? Like, ham from Portugal and $200 rent? Like, am I supposed to come away from this episode considering that Sazz was killed because she came close to discovering their stupid-ass rent control scheme? Because I'm not considering that. Like, I was literally, deflated by that shit. Like, I sighed, all of the air out of my body. Like, that's it? Like, that's all this was? And then Rudy's like, oh, and the ham radio voice, that was just my ex-girlfriend Helga. And I'm just like, what are y'all even doing at this point? Like, are you even trying? Or are y'all just going with, the first idea that someone shits onto a table in the writer's room? Like, am I bugging? Like, y'all know how much I love this show. Like, I've never criticized it like this, but am I tripping? Or is this shit just feeling kind of lazy right now? And it's wild because, again, I'm really liking the character work, and they're doing better work in that department than I think they've done in any season in the past. But that good stuff, it feels like few and far between, and I find myself laughing a lot less and rolling my eyes a lot more. Hey everybody, I just want to take a small break from this review to talk about the various other ways you can engage with me on other platforms. If you're so inclined, and I understand why you wouldn't, I am an acquired taste, but You can join the Patreon where you can get extra content like retro reviews, where I review old shows and movies to see if they still hold up today. Mike's Musings, where I talk about shows I'm watching that I don't cover on the channel. Or Mike's VOD, where you can commission me to watch a show, which I will then review on the channel. And if you want to engage with me and chat with me more directly, I also implore you to join the Discord and follow the Facebook page. I set up channels in the Discord for all of us to discuss the shows I'm reviewing on the channel, and I also drop new videos in there since it's the easiest platform for me to share to from my phone. The Facebook can be really fun because I sort of live comment on shows I'm watching, often while under the influence, I'm not gonna lie. And I'll also share news there, both about television and film, and about myself as well. So if you like my content, you want to be more engaged, you think I'm charming, or you simply want to show support, feel free to sign up for the Patreon or join the Discord or Facebook today. Links to all platforms are in every video description. Remember to share all my shit to your respective social media platforms. And now back to this review. So the episode begins with Charles bringing out a second victim board since Sazz and her investigations might actually mean that she was the target. Obviously, up to this point, we've kind of assumed it was Charles. Mabel says that they're searching for the victim too. And again, that felt like the writers trying to be a little too cute with their words for no really good reason. Like, we have a victim, it's Sazz. Like, there's no debate about that. They're trying to figure out the intended victim. They want to know if it was meant to be Sazz or not. And I mean, yeah, that might feel nitpicky, like picking at the word uses there. Like, and admittedly, it is nitpicky. But if everything else was tight on the show, I'd let that go. But I'm having all sorts of issues with like the writing at this point. So even the small stuff feels noticeable. Oliver's insecurities, and again, I like what they're doing with that. They lead him to create a fake Instagram page to stalk Loretta. And that's how they learn that Sazz had an IG and that she was following Loretta on there. Sazz posted a selfie to IG from a stuntman bar called Concussions on the day that she died. So that's where the crew is going to head to. Now, of note here, before they head off to Concussions, something that was meant to be funny, of course, did not make me laugh, but instead it sent me to Google to verify. Oliver says that if you can't draw a clock, that means you can have Alzheimer's. And instead of laughing, like I feel like the writers probably intended for me to do, I went, is that true? And like paused it and went to Google. The clock drawing test is indeed a real test for dementia and Alzheimer's. Because both reading and drawing a clock require skills that will be failing in somebody who has either of those illnesses. So I didn't laugh, but at least I learned something. But when our crew arrives at Concussions, they're not welcome because they're perceived as trying to capitalize off of Sazz's death with their podcast. And even this, like when they first arrive at Concussions, this entire sequence bothered me too, because if they were as close to Sazz as they claim to be, they'd know how important Charles is to her. Like I spent the initial moments of that scene confused by how people who claim to love Sazz so much could be so mean to one of her dearest friends. But again, I hate to say lazy, and I'm not going to do it. Well, I just did. But I'm not going to accuse the writers of being lazy here, but like that just, I feel like you're not thinking this through. But anyway, they're upset, the stuntmen, because they want to have a stuntman funeral for Sazz, but they can't because they don't have her body. And again, maybe I'm tripping, but all this was just kind of dumb to me, man. Like, I'm just sitting here like, what are we even doing? Like, this is what y'all came up with? Like, this isn't interesting or funny or whatever. But you have the stuntman funeral shit. This is where Paul Rudd shows up. I've already talked about that. And I'm just not into this episode. Like, once the scene of him, like, hurting himself happened, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of checked out of the episode at this point. But Rudd's character does reveal that Sazz was probably at the bar that night to see their chiropractor. And I did find it a bit funny that a bar for stuntman would have, like, an in-house chiropractor. But when Charles meets with the chiropractor, she only serves to add to his guilt and feelings of responsibility over Sazz's death, telling him that she was looking forward to retiring, all this kind of shit that he just is not in a good place to hear. But he does find a nice way to kind of pay her back, even though she's dead, by allowing the use of his body for this stuntman funeral, which I liked both as a gesture from Charles the character, and I thought the smashing of the bottles over their heads was funny. But still, we're through 4 episodes now, and I still don't feel like, again, we're no closer to finding out who the intended victim was or why they were targeted. Like, in these last couple episodes, the mystery is really kind of fallen into the background, only popping up to, like, seemingly connect us from one unfunny bit to the next. Like, this episode ends with Molly Shannon's character, Bev Mellon, holding them at gunpoint, and that just felt like the perfect ridiculous ending for this lackluster episode. Like, I didn't even think the things that I should have been thinking in that moment. Like, why is she even here? Why does she have a gun on them? I just went like, whatever, man, and cut the shit off. Like I don't know, man. This episode just did not work for me. But there is one thing that I want to point out positive before I end this video, and it's about Howard. You know, Howard continues to be the bright spot on this show. A bright spot on it. I don't want to say the bright spot. A bright spot on this show. And I said on Facebook that I'd say he's an undervalued character if it weren't for the fact that he's very clearly not undervalued. Like, we haven't seen any of the other Arconia residents this season, which is weird, right? That's just, again, stark contrast to the first 3 seasons. But we've got Howard, and Howard alone. And every time he shows up, he proves his worth. So even just when he was mouthing the tagline to his animal podcast, even that was funny to me. He comes in, he gets a couple of scenes an episode, but funny every time. But yeah, not a fan of this episode. But I mean, let me know if you think I'm tripping in the comments. But yeah, hopefully they'll recover a little bit stronger next week. And until then, peace.